Alright, new video, feeling good, feeling fine, let's do it. Masaomi Kida is one of my favorite characters of all time, from one of my favorite shows of all time. Now, that might sound a little strange, because Durarara is a really crazy show, designed to show off a lot of really crazy characters, and indeed, there are characters that are much more sexy, dangerous, exotic, and weird than Masaomi Kida. And the whole point of the show is that all of the seemingly normal people that you walk by in your day-to-day life are actually really crazy dudes that are the protagonists of their own story. And compared to them, Masaomi can come off as just plain old domestic. But just like Roy Mustang, I love Masaomi partially for just the creative way his character is expressed to the audience. And that is what we are going to be talking about today. Durarara is a show that runs on reveals. Watching it is an act of information warfare committed against the audience. Most of the show's biggest moments are when we get a different piece of information that completely changes the way that we see a character or reveals the scope of these events, completely mixing up the balance of power in the story. It's great every single time, and Masaomi's arc works like that, but the audience has to jump through a few hoops to get there, so let's talk about them. You can't talk about Masaomi Kida without discussing his best friend Mikado Ryugamine. You really can't. The two characters are written to complement each other. This is done constantly in writing. Characters are paired together so the audience can compare and contrast them, and the way one character changes will relate to another. Mikado is the series protagonist, or, well, as close as Durarara can have to a series protagonist. He's often the point of view character, and for much of the show is also the audience surrogate, which simply means that he is the character who the information that he has is most equal to the information that the audience has. You see this all the time. It allows for characters to explain things to that character while also not boring the audience because they're explaining information that the audience also doesn't know. For instance, if we already knew the ins and outs of the wizarding world, the scene where Hagrid tells Harry that it exists would be boring, but because we don't, the "You're a wizard, Harry" scene becomes iconic and powerful, a turning point in the story. Mikado is not only the audience surrogate, but he's also the first character we meet and the narrator of the first episode, which pretty much guarantees that we're going to be aligned with him and take his side against other characters. And the first character contrast against Mikado is Masaomi. Now, the first 12 episodes of Durarara, what I generally call the first season, are dedicated to hooking the audience and also breaking their expectations to make Mikado as awesome and as cool a character as possible. At first, Mikado is the most boring kid in the world, if, kinda nice, and that allows him to contrast heavily with the crazy world that he's found himself in. But in one of the show's most iconic moments, and one of my favorite moments in anime, Mikado is revealed to be the progenitor and the boss of the Dollars, this brutal and mysterious group of people we've been building up for a whole 12 episodes. At this point, not only is Mikado a relatable everyman, but he's this dynamic character who performs heroic feats at the heart of the action. In contrast, the same episodes are designed to portray Masaomi as an ineffectual chump. His jokes are lame, his jibes are annoying, and the way that he treats women is just knuckleheaded. What's worse is that he's introduced as the guy who's supposed to know everything about the city, but Mikado quickly becomes way more connected to the underworld than he ever was. Mikado is a hero, taking his first steps into a magical world, while Masaomi is left on the sidelines, an irrelevant and stupid kid. Masaomi is all talk and no action. A dumb fool who blusters constantly with nothing to back it up. Or at least that's what we're led to believe. The next 12 episodes are dedicated to reversing that opinion. Turns out that Masaomi is the leader and founder of the Yellow Scars, one of the city's most brutal street gangs. In his youth, Masaomi dominated the delinquent gang scene, blooding the streets, taking territory block by block, earning the respect of kids far his senior. However, in a bid for power, eventually Masaomi gets way in over his head, and a girl who he started dating mostly for status and because he figured that he just, kinda should, ends up getting her legs broken by the terrifying leader of the Blue Squares. In her time of crisis, Masaomi was too scared to go and save her. In the end, Masaomi was just a dumb, disaffected kid who did what he did because he didn't have anything better to do. Let that be a lesson, guys. If you leave your middle schoolers alone, they will get into street violence. Monitor them at all times. By the time the audience enters the story, Masaomi is a harmless joker who stays out of the underworld because he's already been burned by the underworld. He's already been through the starry-eyed phase that Mikado currently finds himself in. Masaomi saw the entrance of his old friend Mikado as a chance to get back something that he lost. He tries to reclaim his innocence, spending his time relaxing, flirting, goofing off, and trying to stay the hell away from everything that burned him. Even setting up some weird love triangle between Mikado himself and Henri, trying to make his life some sort of idealized scene out of a manga. But this in itself is just another form of running away. Masaomi has yet to deal with his past. He has yet to accept the fact that he has failed. He has yet to grow. Masaomi escapes the gang life, and he makes friends, but when those friends are threatened, Masaomi finds himself trapped. He's too scared to let anyone in, to tell them what he is and what he did, but at the same time, he has to help. He has to go back to the gang to protect Henri and Mikado. The irony, of course, is that in his actions, he puts them in far more danger. Instead of communicating with anyone, Masaomi goes off half-cocked, fighting for his friends while still keeping them at arm's length, distancing himself from them more and more as he tries to fight for them without even knowing what they're going through. Dashing back to a dangerous world, too blind to realize that the gang that he's built has gone rotten in his absence. He's blinded by rage and fear, and that leads to Masaomi losing all of his status and putting his friends in even more danger. This lowest point is a crucible, a crossroads, a chance to find out what Masaomi really is deep down. And what we find is perhaps the most badass character in the entire show. What's cool about Masaomi is that even then in like the grand scheme of Durarara's power rankings, he's really weak. He still takes on enemies far, far stronger than themselves and in greater numbers, taking a freaking crowbar to the face and getting up with the blood pouring all over his head. Oh, I love that crap. This time, Masaomi doesn't rely on Izaya Orihara, the gang, to solve his problems. He faces them head on, and afterwards he makes things right with the person he wants to be closest to. But Kida isn't done. He's still not ready to fully face his friends, to fully reveal to them who he is, instead imagining them as far less complicated than they actually are. A flaw that those two friends also suffer from. But another lesson that Masaomi learns is to give up his aspirations for power. He isn't really concerned about the fact that the yellow scars rotted in his absence. He doesn't really want that life anymore. What he really wants is to be with the people that he loves, and so he does that. In the end, Masaomi decides to simplify. He leaves, not able to face the idealized versions of Henri and Mikado he has in his head. And so he flees Ikebukuro. But in his absence, Mikado demonstrates that he has learned none of Masaomi's lessons. Mikado is a control freak. He needs and wants power. He is capable of controlling and organizing hundreds of people, constantly juggling dozens of variables to make sure a plan goes off without a hitch. What's more, he's arrogant. He thinks he can keep his precious little dollars just the way he wants them to be, without using force, and while maintaining total I'm not redoing this cut. The word is on the screen. You know what it means. But as more variables come in, Mikado finds the dollars growing and twisting far from the careful mold he had laid for them. In his frustration, he grows desperate, and in his desperation, he dives deeper into the underworld, where he gets his first taste of power. Mikado gets darker, but he rationalizes this, saying that this is better this way, and he can keep Henri safe, meanwhile just forcing her farther and farther away. Just like Masaomi did, and not actually talking to her about what's going on. Turns out, Mikado really can't handle the gang life. His crimes and shifting identity leave him terrified of himself, and without a solid rock to stand on, he's left adrift, wandering in the world of his own head, and eventually everything spirals out of control so much, and he's left to look at all the things he's done that he's left with the most terrible of conclusions. Suicide. The character we meet in Season 1 barely resembles the person we're forced to face in Season 5. But we can still understand how Mikado came to these conclusions. We can still understand how far he fell and how he fell that way. And this is where Masaomi comes back in. Remember, Masaomi is a character that everyone wrote off as annoying and irrelevant, especially compared to our boy Mikado. But that changes. We fall in love with Masaomi as he demonstrates his strength and deals with his own bullshit. He was able to cut through his own problems by finding strength in other people and also taking responsibility for his own actions, facing what he did head on instead of running away from it and trying to find some stupid solution that was unsustainable. Just, like Mikado is doing. Mikado isolates himself, sending him deeper and deeper into his own darkness, and it spins him out of control. In many ways, these two made the same mistake. They got obsessed with power. They tried to fix their own problems alone, while forcing people who loved them away. They thought it was their responsibility to solve their own problems, not realizing that when someone loves you, your problems are their problems. When Masaomi catches back up with the person who was supposed to be his best friend, the man he finds, he can barely recognize, and we share in his horror, seeing the person who he related to so heavily be twisted so far into this corrupt perversion of what he thinks life is supposed to be like. Masaomi, the clown, is now our hero. He goes to drag Mikado out of the filth that he once swore to protect him from. He failed back then. He failed because he didn't understand Mikado, because he imagined him as less complex than he actually was. He didn't speak openly about the realities of his life, instead trying to force this fictional status quo that allowed him to run from his guilt. The Masaomi who confronts Mikado is older and wiser. He sees in his friend a darkness even greater than the one that took him, an illness that only festers and grows when the sick don't get treatment. And it is ultimately the intervention of Mikado and Masaomi's other loved ones that pull him out and redeem him. I personally think it's really freaking cool how, the opinions the audience has for these two different characters are manipulated by the writer and eventually switched around for devastating emotional impact. Showing the audience that characters weren't what they initially expected and then weren't what they expected even after that, it forces them to pay more attention to their story, to think about it deeper. Before we end this video, I want to interject a little bit of my own wisdom. Just like Mustang last time, Mikado slips into his own mental illness alone, and it's not him that gets himself out. It is the interventions of the people who love him. Don't be afraid to save the ones you love. Sometimes they need you more than they let on. And don't suffer alone. Reach out to the people who care about you, because you might be surprised how much some people are willing to drop and help you if you ask them. Also, never spend too much time in your own head. It rarely does any good. Bad decisions are made in a vacuum. Don't be lonely. Hang out with other people. As Mikado says at the end of the show, that is what's real. It's what's always been real. And it's what's always gonna be real, folks. And that's gonna wrap up this character analysis. This is a thing. I like this thing. We're gonna keep going on this a little bit more. There'll be other content later, but let's just see where this goes. I'm liking it's some good flavor. It's a good vein to be in. I don't know what I'm talking about. Trust me, guys, whether or not this channel takes off and goes anywhere, I have enough scripts and ideas to keep me going for years. I'm just gonna make these videos no matter or not anyone actually wants to consume them. And we're going to keep analyzing characters. Maybe comment down there what character you think I should analyze. The best comment is going to receive this UGA plushie that I fished out of a dumpster. I promised I washed it. It also was a pretty nice dumpster. Also, if you weren't aware that some dumpsters are nicer than others, I suggest you check your privilege. Follow me on Twitter if you want access to my brain, and subscribe if you want a better chance of getting the next video, which is hopefully going to be better, and I am going to get on making. In the meantime, y'all be good.